Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Rest Day with Jack Haig. Sorry, it's been a while. I've been taking a bit of a break after the Tour de France, both mentally and physically. Tour de France. I'm curious about how it was from a spectator's point of view. I think from what I heard, it seemed to be quite an entertaining tour despite sort of Poggi running away with it a little bit there in the end. From a rider's point of view, it was not so interesting, especially maybe the first half of the race. There wasn't a whole lot happened. No real breakaway stages really went away, especially other than the stage 1 and stage 2, which was maybe a bit of a surprise, and no one really expected those two stages to go to the breakaway. Another thing about the tour, super nice to meet Kaylee and some of the other Escape Collective team in person. I'd met most of them in person before very briefly, but this time we actually had more than a 5-second chat, which was quite nice because most of the communication I've had with them has been over the internet. Maybe I could talk a little bit about the final week of the Tour de France, and maybe more importantly, the final stage no longer being the Champs-Élysées stage. I don't know whether I enjoyed it and I like it being a time trial, or whether I prefer the Champs-Élysées stage, because at the end of the stage 20 on Saturday, I had a very nice feeling of accomplishment after the stage, because it was basically done. TT was going to be a between 45 and 55 minute effort. I was going to be alone, and I don't know, I had a really nice feeling at the end of stage 20, whereas when you need to do the Champs-Élysées stage or a normal stage at the end of a Grand Tour, okay, it is somewhat of a procession, but it's still 3.5 hours and it does kind of hurt. The Champs-Élysées stage is, you do a bit of, I guess, procession into Paris, but once you get to Paris, it's actually kind of hard, and the cobblestones are actually also kind of hard. And after 2 or 3 weeks of racing, you're kind of mentally already checked out, because you know it's kind of done, but it's not really done. And then you're not really mentally prepared to be hurting yourself. And then it's someone else is dictating the pace, which is hurting you, and it kind of hurts more than it probably should. So I kind of enjoyed the time trial because you could kind of go as hard or more or less as easy as you want, and it was up to yourself. And it was only, less than an hour. It was maybe a little bit different as well. I was lucky enough that I had my family. They came to watch the last 3 days of the Tour de France. They drove from Andorra to Isola 2000, and they saw the finish of the stage there. And then they stayed around Nice to watch the start of Saturday and then the time trial stage. And now it was actually kind of odd as well, because my team only had 5 riders left, and then 2 of them went really early on in the TT because they were quite far down on GC. Then Wout Poels and myself were kind of close together around, I think, that top 20 to 30 GC range, and then Santiago was obviously a little bit later, closer to the finish. And my family came up to the team hotel in the morning of stage 21, and because I wasn't going full in the time trial, I didn't do the recon in the morning, and they actually got to hang out with me in the hotel. We had a nice swimming pool, and I spent the morning of the final stage of the Tour de France hanging out with my son in the swimming pool, which is pretty fun and kind of very different and relaxing. And then they had lunch with me in the hotel, drove with me to the start of the time trial in Monaco. And because there was only basically Wout and myself there, it was all quite relaxed. Wout also wasn't going maximum in the time trial as well, so it was a really sort of nice, relaxed atmosphere. The staff were all kind of just hanging out, enjoying a little bit. Obviously, once Santiago arrived, everything got a little bit more serious, a bit more focused, and tried to get him in the right headspace. But until then, it was quite fun. I do a bit of you still do a warm up, even though you're not going full in the time trial. So I did a 15-minute warm-up, but much easier than what I would normally do. And then in the follow car behind me, I actually had my family, which was actually also really cool. And again, it's a very rare opportunity that would be able to happen. So I'm very thankful for the team allowing me to have that, but also that I think it was a pretty cool experience for my son and my wife to be in the car. One of the things that my wife said after the finish was that it's actually very shocking and surprising to see in real life behind a rider how fast we go down a downhill, and she didn't really enjoy it. And my son actually just fell asleep in the car once we got to the top of the climb, so he obviously didn't find it too bad. But on the Col de Torini out of Monaco, he was also on the radio giving me some encouragement, and that was pretty cool. Time trial finished in Nice, obviously. Now, it's a little bit different because normally when you finish in the Champs-Élysées, everyone kind of arrives at the same time. But again, because we had Mate and Nikias go off quite early, they were in a VIP area, not at the bus, with some of the sponsors and the management of the team. And then Wout and myself just kind of hung out of the bus for a little bit, watched the TV to see Santiago secure 10th place on GC, and to watch Poggy smash it like he had been doing for basically the 3 weeks. Yeah, it was nice, but it was also a bit strange not having all the team there on the bus at the end. So again, good and bad things. I hope it looked quite nice on TV. The Côte d'Azur always looks really beautiful. And I think also for a lot of the riders, it's so close to home. So I think a lot of them enjoyed being able to be at home either Sunday night or Monday morning. Now, typically at the end of a Grand Tour, the team will organize some kind of dinner and restaurant, but it always gets to be a little bit of a mess because normally the final stage, and especially this year, like it finished quite late. Our team hotel was sort of 45 minute drive away. By the time everyone is sort of packed up, you got out of all the chaos, the bus had managed to make its way out of the center of Nice. I think we sort of ended up leaving the team hotel to go to dinner at about 10 p.m. And as maybe some people will know from traveling in France, it's quite hard to get a decent meal very late at night. So it generally ended up just being sort of a cocktail, sort of tapas style food with a few drinks, and a couple of team sponsors normally end up there, and the management and the staff, and everyone just kind of has a bit of a relaxed atmosphere. But also most people are quite tired at this point and sort of just politely go around, say thank you to everyone, enjoy a few drinks, and then normally head back to the hotel. Some of the guys that live in Monaco went back to their home Sunday night. Me and my family, we went back to the team hotel, spent the night there, and then because we had the car, we drove halfway back to Andorra, spent a day and a night at a beach and sort of just hung out, and then drove rest of the way back to Andorra. I put a message out on the Escape Collective Discord channel to kind of help motivate me and give me some ideas for what you guys would like to hear on this pod, because I didn't really have anything planned or anyone around to talk too much to. And I'm going to go through, answer a couple of the questions here. The first one is about the post-tour criteriums. Now, I don't really have that much experience with this, and I think it's mostly because I'm not European and I don't have one of the big European agents or managers that generally facilitate how these criteriums work. But one of my teammates, Wout Poels, especially last year when he was, I think, the only Dutch rider to win a stage in the Tour de France. This year, Groenewegen also won one. But last year, Wout did actually quite a lot of post-tour criteriums, I think somewhere between 10 and 14. So there's definitely still a lot of them around. I think this year as well, there was maybe a little bit less because of Olympics. And most people that were high profile and normally get taken to these criteriums were probably going to the Olympics and didn't really participate in them. But they definitely still exist. They are, from what I've heard, quite good with money-wise. I think it can range from anywhere from a couple €1,000 per criterium all the way up to tens of thousands of euros, depending on who you are, if you've won a jersey, if you're world champion, etc., and how high profile you are. So yeah, they can make quite a bit of money for some of the riders, but I personally have never done them or never really been invited, so I don't know too much about them. Now, next one we have here is about equipment choices. I can maybe talk a little bit about the gravel stage and then how it works for most of the stage, most of the race. So for the gravel stage, we almost all used the aero bike. So with Merida, we have both the Sculptura, which is more of the climbing bike, and then we have the Reacto, which is more of the aero bike. I think everyone used the Reacto. I used the 60 millimeter wheels. So we have Vision as a wheel sponsor, and we have 3 different types of wheels. We have a 37 millimeter wheel, which was new for Tour de France, a 45 and a 60. I used the 60 with 30 millimeter tubeless GP 5000 Continental tires. The gravel actually wasn't so bad. There was a couple of sectors that were kind of deep gravel, but I was really happy with the bike and tire choice and wheel choice for the stage. Now, we do have the option of the 2 frames, and I do swap during the race depending on the stage. But the climbing frame and bike, I'm using less and less just because of how high the speeds are now, that I really feel that using the aero bike, even though there's, depending, again, this is a rough estimate, between 300 and 400 grams difference, it's more beneficial and I feel more comfortable and like I have a bit of an advantage with the aero frame. So yeah, for some of the stages, especially like stage 19 and 20, which were basically just mountains the whole time with not too much high-speed flat areas, I will use the climbing bike. And then I'd say for about 80% of my races throughout the year and 80% of the stages of the Tour de France, I choose the aero one. Now, we are given a recommended equipment setup by the team. And how it normally works is on the transfer back to the hotel at the finish of the stage, we then write in a WhatsApp group what we want for the following days in terms of equipment. And then to preface that message, normally the sports director will send a recommended equipment setup, and then it's up to the riders to decide what they actually want or not. And some riders will change the chain rings more often. Some riders will change the cassette or wheels, or it's actually up to the rider ultimately. The next question that we have here is asking about the recovery process and what it looks like and how many days I have off or easy before I start training for the next race. So my next race is going to be San Sebastian, which is next weekend, or this weekend, probably by when this podcast gets released, and then Vuelta a España. And basically how it's worked is, if I open my Training Peaks here and have a look at the calendar, there's actually not that much time between the end of the Tour de France and San Sebastian. There's just less than 3 weeks. Now, on the week directly after Tour, I took 3 days off the bike, nothing whatsoever, where I just hung out with the family. Like I said, I spent a night at the beach on the way home to Andorra, and then just 1 day at home without the bike. So 3 days completely off. And then I did Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all kind of endurance easy rides. So it was 3 hours easy endurance Thursday, 2.5 hours Friday, 4 hours Saturday, and then on the Sunday I did 4 hours again. So just like 13 hours or 12, 13 hours total for the week after the Tour de France, and basically just all endurance. Like I think I averaged less than 200 watts for all these rides. So super easy, mostly just like keeping the body going a little bit because I couldn't take a full break without needing more time to build up for San Sebastian. Then the week that I'm recording this, I did about 20 hours of training, and you sort of just start to throw in a few intervals just to keep the body a little bit awake. But again, mostly the rides were easy. I had one full day off, and then I did 1 day of threshold intervals, but only 8 minutes. There were 3 by 8 minute sort of low threshold, then endurance ride, super easy again, recovery ride. Then I did 5 times 2 to 3 minutes super hard, so not maximal but hard, and then 1 by 10 minute 30-30s just to sort of keep the high end there. And then I finished off with again another endurance ride, more than 5 hours, and then a rest day where I just went to a cafe. Now, the week going into San Sebastian, I'll probably do, again, 2 hardish days. But again, it's not about trying to improve. It's more about just trying to keep the body awake and the body used to pushing sort of that higher power. So again, it'll probably be one sort of easy threshold session and then one hard, so I guess maybe you could call it a VO2 max, or I don't know, just more harder than threshold. And then San Sebastian, and that'll be the only hard sessions I have that week. Otherwise, it'll either be endurance or resting. And then I've only got, 5 days until Vuelta a España starts. So there's not really that much time to train between the Tour and Vuelta. It's more about just trying to keep the body ticking over and do just enough to make sure that when you arrive at Vuelta that you can go into the race and hopefully improve a little bit and not be too tired from Tour de France. But it is a very hard thing to balance, and it changes every single year depending on how and what your role was at Tour de France, how hard it was, whether there was bad weather, etc. So it's actually kind of pretty hard to take a template from previous years as to how you manage it. The other one here was talking about managing the body during the Tour de France, the weight. So my morning weight before breakfast slowly increased throughout the race. And this is probably due to stress and cortisol levels and a bit of extra fluid retention. Also, we had some hot weather, not too hot, but during Tour de France. But my after stage weight, so when we come back to the bus, we weigh ourselves either before or after we take a shower, and that was pretty stable throughout the 3 weeks. So my weight stayed more or less the same. We do use Oura rings in the team, and that tracks just the sleep, the resting heart rate, and HRV. I mostly don't look too much at it. I just try to get between 8 and 9 hours sleep every night, and that stays pretty consistent. My resting heart rate doesn't really change that much either. I need to be really sick for my personal resting heart rate to change. It always hovers around sort of 38 to 41. Then power, again, stays pretty stable throughout the race. Like I think I did for the Tour de France some of the higher power numbers at the end in stage 19 and 20. So it doesn't really change too much either. Now moving on to the next question. They're asking about how the relationships in the peloton work. And I guess I'm maybe someone that enjoys trying to talk and have conversations with other people from other teams. Just it helps pass the time on some of the easier stages, and I enjoy sort of trying to learn from the other riders. I have a lot of friends that I train with here in Andorra. A couple of examples, Pavel Sivakov. Today I rode with him to the cafe. We have a pretty good relationship. He rides for UAE. I ride for Bahrain. Sometimes, yeah, you sort of fight a little bit for position or have a little bit, but I think a lot of us have been racing long enough that understand that in the race, as long as you're not a complete idiot and you're relatively respectful, but you can be, I guess, fighting in a respectful way or having an argument in a respectful way, that in the race is racing, and then outside of racing, we can be friends. But I would say that it's not, maybe it's also a bit my personality. I don't get into, I guess, big arguments in the peloton. But yes, there are some arguments, especially as something like a Grand Tour goes on, more and more people get tired. And then sometimes you'll find a certain couple of people in the peloton that become very annoying after a while. And some people do have arguments with them. But generally, in terms of people on other teams and having friends on other teams, I think it stays pretty neutral, and people respect and understand that what happens in racing is racing. And then generally 99% of the peloton are actually really nice people once you take the race number off. So people try not to hold too many grudges against other riders. And then in terms of like what the teams do to get to build a bond, in Green Edge, we actually did something that was really fun, and it really, I think, helped build a bond. One of them was we did this like traveling preseason camp, and it was a bit different because most of the Green Edge riders were Australian or New Zealand, and they would go home during the European winter. So there was only maybe between 10 and 15 people in Europe from the 30 or whatever man team. So it was a smaller group, and you would do like this preseason traveling camp. One year went from Barcelona to Almeria in the south of Spain. Then another one went from Almeria to, I think, Lagos or Faro in Portugal. And then we also did one in Italy from the south to the north. Not all of Italy, obviously, but it was about 10 days. And you kind of just did between 6 and 8 hours a day, moving point to point every single day. And it was kind of no one really did that many intervals. And it was a really nice way of building a relationship, because we'd also stop, have a really nice lunch, coffee stop during the ride. Another thing that the team in Green Edge did was, again, in the preseason, I think it was around the end of November or start of December, again, about 10 or 15 of the guys that were in Europe, we went to do some of the preseason medical scanning, the photos, the bike fitting, and we did that for 2 or 3 days in the northern part of Italy. And then we drove to Switzerland in Gstaad, because there was a relationship there, I think, with Scott Bikes, who were sponsoring us at the time. And we did some like fat biking there. We went rock climbing. We went skiing one day. There was an ice hockey rink that was outdoors there. We played ice hockey for a little bit, and it was 3 days, but it's actually one of the funner times I've had inside a team, where we didn't really think about the bike. We didn't really think about anything. It was just more just guys having fun. So that was actually a really nice experience. But I think it's getting harder and harder to fit in those like non-bike activity bonding camps, because the seasons are getting longer. And I think a lot of the guys, when they're off the bike, prefer to be with their family or their friends, not inside the team. But another really good bonding area is when we do altitude camps, and the group is smaller. So in the preseason camps, when you have between 20 and 30 athletes there, a bunch of staff, it's actually pretty hard to build a bond because there's so many people. But when you do an altitude camp, for example, when we go to Tenerife, there's maybe between 4 to 6 athletes and between 4 and 5 staff members, and you spend a lot of time there and you get to build a really nice relationship. So I really enjoy that. Then now we have another question here about the mental struggles of cycling. I think if you go back and listen to another episode that I did, I spoke a little bit about myself and some of the mental struggles that maybe I've gone through. And we don't have a sports psychologist or therapist inside the team, but there are plenty out there. I've used a couple. I find them useful to a degree. I think like most professions around sort of psychology and therapy, it really depends on the person you're doing it with and how good of a relationship you have with them and how comfortable you are sharing things. Professional sport is super demanding mentally and physically, but I think maybe the mental side of it isn't spoken about so much, and a lot of emphasis is put on the physical preparation and not so much the mental preparation, both just in terms of performance, but also just general well-being. So I think it's something that's getting spoken about more and more openly, but it's definitely not something that's being integrated into the professional peloton. If you want to utilize a therapist, you can do it, but it's not something that is pushed upon you too much. Another question here is talking about the toll of doing a GC at the tour, and then it touches on the point that Poggy's not going to be doing Welter or Olympics, and then Sepp Kuss, how he did the 3 Grand Tours last year. Now, I think one of the things in a Grand Tour is that it's incredibly mentally draining because you have so much stimulus every day, for day in, day out for 3 weeks, in terms of there's so many people on the side of the road. You're riding in a peloton that's moving very fast. You're close to everyone. There's all these moving parts. You're in the bus all the time. You're changing hotels. And it's, I guess, all this mental stimulus and the media, doing interviews, doing photos, going to the presentation, and just a lot of things go on outside of just the 3 to 5 hours that we do on the bike. And I think that really accumulates over time. And especially if you're someone like Poggy, I could not imagine having to do the amount of media and interviews and everything that he has to do, being in the leaders jersey all the time, answering so many questions. And I'm actually not so surprised that he didn't go to the Olympics. And I'm definitely not surprised he's not going to Welter, because not only is it the Tour de France, but think about the altitude camp he did before Giro. Then he probably went almost directly from that altitude camp to the Giro. Then after the Giro finished, I think he spent a week at home in Monaco, and then I think he went back to another altitude camp in Isola. And he went almost directly from that altitude camp to a Tour de France. So the poor guy hasn't been home. And like, I think everyone can appreciate that sometimes it's just nice to be at home, and it's something that maybe isn't appreciated, is how much time you spend away from home and how refreshing it can be just to try and be at home and have a kind of normal routine. So I'm not that surprised about Poggy not doing Welter or Olympics. I was very impressed with Sepp Kuss though last year, and I think part of that was he didn't have the pressure of riding GC both in the Giro and the Tour, and then he kind of fell into leading the GC in the Welter almost by accident, but obviously 100% deserving of the Welter win, but it wasn't sort of planned. And even that whole build-up process of being the leader going into a race also takes a bit of a mental toll and can be quite fatiguing. Now, that wraps up all the questions. I really appreciate you guys sending them in. It really sort of helps me with the feedback and understanding what you guys really want to listen to. And I'll hopefully try and find another guest to get on, so it's just not myself rambling away here, and you guys can have more of a interactive and entertaining interview with someone else. Like I said, I'll be doing San Sebastian Welter, and I can hopefully grab some of my teammates there and we can talk through some of those. And if you have questions around those two races or around Grand Tours, I can ask them while we're doing them. So that would make it a little bit more interesting. Thanks again, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will talk to you guys soon.